Hello, and welcome once again to Mark's Diatonic Dungeon of Despair. Um, this one is about chords. Hopefully, this is quick. I'm going to ramble probably a little bit. I have a nasty habit of rambling when I'm trying to focus. But then again, I am 60 years old, so I tend to wander every now and then. Um, when I first started playing guitar, right, I learned all the basic chords, the big cowboy chords, right? That we all learn, right? The F that drove me insane. The F that I could not play. I can play it easily now. The F that I couldn't play. Bar chords. I could not do this for months and get all six strings evenly. Couldn't do it. Just was hard. And this, partial bar, that's the full bar. We all know that. We all know the full bar. Here's the partial bar. We all know the partial bar. That's the one that starts on the A string. Getting that top string's a booger, but I can do it. I couldn't at first. I couldn't. And the one that made me absolutely nuts was the B7. Was the first, the B and the B7. The B, I had to learn the partial bar, not the whole thing. I didn't play the top string back then. I would just play those four strings from strings 5 to string 2. So, the B7 though, right? The A7 was easy, right? Two fingers, easy, simple city, kitty. The C7, that was fairly simple, right? But the B7 was a booger. G7 was simple, right? Easy peasy, right? But the B7, this one, was so hard because back then I had fat little worm fingers, right? And I could not get my fingers to fit well inside those frets. And so I learned my bar chords as best I could, and I learned the variations thereof. There's the major, there's the minor, there's the 7, and there's the minor 7. Bar chord didn't work well for a major 7, though, for the major 7. And I struggled trying to learn all the easiest way to get a G major 7 for me was like this, right? Without putting the F sharp at the top, right? I'd have to leave that B out, though, because I again, couldn't get my fingers inside all those frets because I had fat worm fingers. That was the only way I could do a G major 7 at the time. And I didn't, F major 7 was easy, right? C major 7 was easy. A major 7 was easy. Those all seemed pretty simple. B major 7 wasn't easy because it was this. D major 7 was simple. Right? One finger. Right there. Second fret. All three strings, one finger. That was easy. Years went by, and I'm not kind of self-taught. I'm completely self-taught, but I did have help from guitar magazines that I subscribed to, right? And there were just tons of articles in these magazines about basic techniques, moderate, and advanced techniques. And at the time, I was just focused on learning how to make chords, right? We all do, right? I didn't play a guitar solo for 5 years, when I first started playing. So, and again, there was no tablature back then. Back in my day, we didn't have tablature. We had ears, and we liked it, right? But I'm 60, so I'm an old guy. Didn't have tablature. I could read traditional music. I learned to read music when I was about 13 years old. I was classically trained, so I learned to read music at a young age. And so I would buy these songbooks. They didn't have tablature in them, though. They had traditional notation, and that's where I learned a lot of melodies and solos and stuff like that. But it wasn't very handy. I had to use my ears more than anything else. Those were, my transcription devices right there. And it just meant hours and hours of playing the same song over and over again. Lifting the needle up on a record. Some of you young kids may not know what that means. lifting the needle up, going back a little bit, playing again, right? The same stuff over and over again. Same thing over and over again. I came across an article one day, and they had columns that were, like I said, just all about different techniques, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And I read, it's a funny little article. Somebody had written this funny little article about this space alien who landed on Earth, and he only had 4 fingers. He had a thumb and 3 fingers, and that was it. So he couldn't play bar chords, right? And the guy writing the lesson was very creative, and it was very interesting. And it talked about all the different ways that you could play the chords you wanted to play, but only use maybe 2 fingers or 3 fingers. No bar chords. That lesson had no bar chords in it whatsoever, which I really gravitated to because I couldn't play them anyway. So it went on to describe how he played different chords, minor chords, major 7th, minor 7th, that kind of stuff. And ninths and sevenths and things like that. And then I began to see, well, you know what, though? That's pretty cool, actually. That's pretty cool. So, and I thought I would pass this along because I know we all hate this chord. I don't now, obviously. I don't now. That B7. I can get it here. I can do just 3 strings. Just like that E up here. There's an E7. 3 fingers. D7. 3 fingers. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. I can do this. And I learned when I started playing in bands, at first it was just me on guitar, a bass player, a drummer, and a singer. And then I started playing with other bands that had either a keyboard player or a guitar player. Well, you can't, if you've got 2 guitar players, you can't play all the same chords all the time. You have to find different ways to play. If he's going to play a G here, I'm going to play a G here. Right? I need to find an alternate place so that we're not both playing exactly the same thing. It gets washed out. There's no uniqueness to the sound. So I learned different ways to play those chords, right? He would play a D here, I would play a D here. Right? Didn't have to worry about it. He would play an E here, I would play an E here. Okay? Now, let me also insert here. This was before the caged method, C-A-G-E-D. That's before this, when I was learning to play, that wasn't really a thing yet. Yes, those chords existed, but they hadn't been put into the basic format that we all know now, right? There's C, A, G, E, and D. I started incorporating that before I really knew what it was, though. I knew that this form is A. But I knew that if I played it here, it was a D. If I played it here, it was an E. I already knew it. Okay? I just didn't, it hadn't been formalized yet. So, and then I wanted to branch out on some of the more, some of the sexier, like jazz chords and stuff like that. And I learned to play, the first one that I learned that I used a lot was, it's an alternate version of the major 7 chord, right? And your root note will be on your first finger, okay? Let's say we're going to go to E. There's E, right? 2nd fret, 4th string on the D string. But then you just take your 3rd finger and you plant all 3 at the 4th fret. There's a major 7. I learned that from a Yes song. Wait. there's major 7, E major 7, F major 7, and so on and so forth. F sharp major 7. That was not a chord that I could do well with that partial bar, right? Here's the major 7 for the part. Here's a C major 7 with the partial bar chord, the 5 string. I was sucked at that. I sucked at my bar chords for the longest time. So this article pointed me towards ways that I could make those chords, broken parts of them. I found that I didn't need to always play the root note in a chord because I got a bass player over on my left-hand side who's playing the root notes. And I may have another guitar player over on the right-hand side or a keyboard player that's also playing the chord. So I had to find new and unique ways to play those chords without stepping on anybody's toes. I didn't understand truly the concept of filling the sonic space until I learned to play with another melodic instrument, a guitar or a keyboard. Then I began to think, oh God, I can't do all the stuff that I usually do. I learned all these songs one way. Now I got to go back and think, well, geez, we have to figure out who's going to play what chord. Sometimes you do play the same thing for a lot of the power chord stuff. You can't do that all the time. So you have to find different ways. Like I would play an A here, G. That's from the Rush song Red Barchetta. That's another. I learned a lot about chording from learning songs, and Rush was the first band that I wanted to learn everything they ever did, and I learned quite a bit. But I had to learn to play those chords differently, right? Here's the A bar chord. Now, do I need that whole thing when I've got a bass player and another guitar player? No, I need this. Or I can use this. Or I can use this. Add that high A on the top, and it sounds a little different than the... You can go all over the place as long as you know your neck. I said this last video. You got to know that neck. You got to know every note on that neck in every position, at every fret. And then that way you'll learn, you'll learn to find different places for your chords. The other one that I found out that I learned once I started learning blues music, that's when I began to hear that 9th chord all the time, E9. And I'll have these, I'll put the chord blocks up in the comments after I post this video. There's that 9th chord. That sometimes hurt though. Back in 2016 I had a stroke. It didn't cripple me. It hit me in my visual cortex, almost blinded me, but my left side did go weak on me. But I'd already learned all those chords, 2-finger chords that worked so well. There's the major 7, right? So cool. The dominant 7th was the one that I wanted to get away from always having to do this. And that article that I read showed a really cool way, and it worked well when I was in the context of a band with a bass player and a guitarist or a keyboardist. I would make the shape D, and I would start it on my 4th string. That note right there is G. Your root for this chord, this is an A7. So your root is here. There's A. Those 3 strings are an A7. If you play it with the A string, you hear it. A7, B7, C7, D7, so on and so forth, over and over, all up and down the neck. All the same chords, I'm just not playing all 6 strings. There is no law. Trust me, I've looked it up. There is no law that says you have to play 6 strings to make a chord. Nope. I can play 3. I got to have 3, right? A triad. I got to have, in some cases, you got to have 4 if you want that 7th. You know, you can put the 7th without using the 3rd or the 5th, right? You got to have the root, the 1. Now, you can put the 7th on there without the 3rd or the 5th, but it doesn't quite work. So you want to have at least 4 notes, 4 tones, to make those altered chords, the 7th and the major 7th and the minor 7th. They're going to sound better. Here's G. Here's G7. Here's G minor 7. That's so nice. You got to have at least 4 strings. At least 4. The one that I kept coming up short on was the 9th. I didn't. Yes, it's easy to play. It didn't always work for me in the context of what I was doing. So I learned a different way to do it, right? Here's E. Or rather, here's B. Now I want to play a 9th chord. On the B, it's going to be down here. But it doesn't quite work for me anyway. So what I would do is I would go to, here's the 1, there's the 3, there's the 5. So what I would do is I would go to the 3rd and then create a chord there. And again, all these chord shapes will be in the comments. I've got a little chord block already printed out, a bunch of chord blocks printed out so that you can see them. Now this one came in handy. Not came in handy. I understood why it was so important when I learned the song Tightrope by Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? Watch. That's that 9th chord I just showed you. This one. There's that 9th. All he's doing is he's switching over and adding that B for the very first 2 notes. That 9th came in real handy when I learned, and I'm going to forget the name of the song. It's another Stevie Ray Vaughan song. But I'm going to forget the name of it, right? Wall of Denial. Same 9th chord, same shape that he used for Crossfire, or not Crossfire, wrong one, for Nightrope. Same thing. And that's a 9th chord, but I'm not using the root for the bottom note. I'm using the 3rd for the bottom note, the D sharp. So I'm playing a D sharp, I'm playing an A, I'm playing a C sharp, and I'm playing an F sharp. Same thing with Wall of Denial. That's that 9th chord, but he's just not playing the root note as the bottom note. In fact, he's not playing the root note at all. So It works. It works so much better. He is playing the root note, but he's playing the root note on top, so it doesn't sound like the root. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, that's the B. He's not playing the root note at all. So cool. This seventh chord is the shape of a D, and you play it on the three middle strings. You play it on your second, third, and fourth strings. That seventh chord, dominant seventh. Remember, when I'm talking about seventh chords, in this case, I'm talking about a dominant seventh. Not the major seven or the minor seven, dominant seven. There's A7 right there. Doesn't sound like A7 because there's no root. But when you're in a band, you got a bass player and you got maybe another guitar player or a keyboard player. So you can stay away from always playing the root note of a chord. And again, like I said, there's no law that says you got to use all six strings to make a chord. All of these chord shapes that I just played will be in the comments of this video. After it's done processing and I get done writing them out, I got chores I got to do. I got to clean up my kitchen and get my house clean for, the day, and so I don't have to do anything tomorrow but play guitar. But this is an easy way. Not easy. It's not necessarily easy. I mean, you got to use this. It's easier here, but you got to use this to figure out what these chords, what your root note is. You're not always going to play the root note. I don't always play a root note when I play a chord. I don't find it absolutely necessary. I spent too many years playing in bands, and I never had to worry about a root note. I mean, I had bass players that were busy, that played like Chris Squire or Geddy Lee. I had bass players that weren't that busy. You know what I mean? I had other guitar players that we would have to choreograph what we were going to play for certain songs just so we weren't always playing the same thing. That doesn't sound good. You want to stay off other people's toes and improve the sonic space. If he's going to play a chord down here, I'm going to either add notes. I'm going to play a chord that adds notes below it, right? Or I'm going to add notes that go above it, right? To extend the chord upward. Or, in some cases, downward. If your bass player's not... I had a guy who could chord on bass every bit as good as I could chord on guitar. So I didn't have to worry about a lot of lower notes, the lower register of the palette, the sound palette. I didn't have to think about it. And I also play keyboards as well, so I tend to always think in terms of what do I want my keyboard to do that's different from my guitar, and vice versa. What do I want my guitar to do that's different from the keyboard pattern that I'm playing? You know what I mean? So I had to think long and hard when it came to writing my own material, and I do have a lot of my own material already released. I had to think long and hard about what those parts, how was I going to make those parts unique and distinct? How were they going to play in the palette? Where was I going to put them? What colors were they going to be? So it's called using the sonic space. And I learned to use the sonic space more effectively when I started recording. That's when I started listening to those tracks I'd recorded and saying, well, that works, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. So I would have to go back and change them so that they didn't interfere with each other. That was always a problem. I also play very rhythmically. I started as a drummer, and I have we'll call it an otherworldly sense of rhythm. I can play without a metronome and maintain time within, 3 beats per minute. Because it's something you learn as a drummer. You learn to be a metronome. You have to be a metronome. And if you're not, people don't like you. Ever played with a drummer that can't play the same tempo for longer than 30 seconds? It's the most annoying thing in the world. These chord shapes you don't always have to play them always the same way. You don't have to play your chords the same way every single time. It's not necessary. The big cowboy chords, the big 3-finger chords that we all learn right here in the first fret, right, or the first 3 frets. You don't always have to play those chords. You don't. There's no law that says you have to use 6 strings to make a chord. 3 or 4 notes is really all you need. Technically, 3 or 4 notes. That's it. Check out the chord shapes, and I'll trying to put a little explanation on the page about why, the bottom note's not going to be the root note on most of these. Most of these are not going to have the root note at the bottom. The root may be in the middle or the root may be at the top, but it's not all of them are going to be at the bottom of the chord. It's not going to happen. So, and I'm going to make the little chord shapes. I'm going to write the numbers in, but I'm going to circle them as to what the root is. Like when I play that A7 chord, I'm not playing an A. I'm just playing the 3, the 5, and the 7. So, but I'll put a little circle where your root note is, so you'll know where it is. So that's pretty much it. Have fun and happy playing. Peace, my brothers.